t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello there and welcome to Bruxelles, je t'aime, Euronews' weekly talk show about European politics. On Brussels, my love, we hone in on some stories making news this week. Check what's at stake for you and for Europe. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us. Coming up this week, Greece has voted in parliamentary elections and the winner was clear. Incumbent Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis and his Liberal Conservative New Democracy Party. Left-wing Syriza, that soared to fame after the Greek debt crisis, wiped out for now. But with allegations the government is pushing back migrants, spying on journalists and chipping away at democracy, we're asking if Greeks opted for economic stability over change. And diamonds are forever. Or are they? The EU has tabled an 11th package of sanctions against Russia in order to put pressure on the Russian regime to pull out of Ukraine. The focus is on combating circumvention of sanctions, and Russian diamonds are still off the list. With the UK planning a ban following the footsteps of the US, we head to Antwerp to hear how diamonds are still Belgium's best friend and remain untouchable for now. To talk about these stories and much more, we're joined here in our studio by Cara Lano, the Chief Executive Officer at the think tank SEPS, an independent think tank here in Brussels. Alia Papageorgiou, the President of the Press Club here in the city, and Panos Tasiopoulos from the Wilfred Martin Centre for European Studies, a think tank here affiliated with the European People's Party. Correct. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all. But before we hear your take on those elections, let's just get the latest on the outcome. Christopher Pitchers reports.
Victory in the Greek elections as the centre-right party of Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis comes out on top. In what comes as a shock to many, New Democracy gained nearly 41% of the vote last Sunday, thrashing its main rival, the left-wing Syriza party, which received an underwhelming 20.1%. Despite its unexpectedly strong showing, New Democracy didn't get the amount needed to win an outright majority in Greece's 300-seat parliament. The final victory is still within the reach of Mitsotakis, though, as he looks to grab the bonus seats that come with the second election. And there won't be much standing in his way, given that the key issues that were supposed to impact his re-election chances, like illegal migrant pushbacks and the Pegasus spyware scandal, clearly didn't affect his electability too much. The wait is now for Sunday, June the 25th, as Greek voters once again head to the polls to decide who they want in the driving seat for the next 4 years.
Christopher Pitchers reporting there. So let's look first to our Greeks around the table and get the reaction from them. I guess it was the talk of the town here, Panos.
It was indeed. It was an impressive, a huge victory for Nea Demokratia. It was a historical electoral result, not only because Nea Demokratia, New Democracy, won by 41%. This has happened in the past with other parties. But the difference between the second party, Nea Demokratia and the second party, as well as the collapse of Syriza, which was the major opposition until now. It has never, or I cannot recall, at least since the restoration of the Republic in 1974, a governing party keeping its strength, even increasing it in a proportional system, at the same time the major opposition losing by 12%. Usually we have the opposite, but now this was something stunning that really surprised even Prime Minister Mitsotakis.
So you and your colleagues, I imagine, were in a good mood this week, in celebratory mode, even though, of course, there will be another election likely on the 25th of June, right, Alia?
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't been called yet. Where at this stage it looks like Sunday may be the day where it's called, but it hasn't so far been officially called. But that looks like the plan. The president called in the three leaders of the main political part, well, the highest voted for parties at this stage this week on Wednesday past, and asked them to form a coalition. They said no. We're not doing that. And now we're expecting, and there's a caretaker government been put into place last Thursday, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, with a new caretaker prime minister who is the head of the Court of Auditors, Mr. Sarmas, Yannis Sarmas, at the moment, and he'll be there forming caretaker government till the next round, which the just former Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said he'll go to a second round, which is more than likely at this stage to be the 25th of June.
But here in Brussels, Carol, what has the mood been on the outcome to the election? Is there a feeling, like we heard there from Panos, that the opposition is dead for now? Sarisa?
Well, you could say it positively. It's good that the Greeks realize they need stability and they need economic stability. Of course, there have been probably insufficiently in the news that there has been enormous help from Europe, meaning the banking system is still held by the Europeans. Let's say there is still a lot of debt which is held by the European Central Bank. DG ECFIN, let's say the Economic Affairs DG here in Brussels, has been during years all over there, I'd say in Greece, helping to re-establish the system in a normal way. So it's good that people see this, let's say, that there has been a lot of support from Brussels for this, and that the economy, the country is back in a stable state, and the people want to continue to be that way. But don't forget, the very important thing, we're still fairly far below the levels of wealth which they had in 2007. So the country has come down a lot, also as a result of Syriza. If you see what happened in 2015 or so.
And we have to add, Carol, as well, a lot of pain suffered by the Greeks.
But that's what people need to know, and that's what you see in these elections. People know. It's not that they forget and that they are stupid. No, they know what they do.
No,
I know
it's that pain, just very briefly.
They still feel it. They still feel it today. Households still feel it today. The restructuring of the banks, creditors, etc. The repayments still continue for many families to this day because of the situation.
Wages are very low, of course.
Wages are still very low, but Kyriakos Mitsotakis has made it his point to focus on the fact that he needs to raise that particular section, that employment has to actually be beneficial to the employees as well, and be aiming for European levels in a very emphatic way. He does work on that.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, what the Nea Demokratia campaign had all along the last 1 month when it took place, or even a little bit more, it was a concrete plan for the present and for the future, and how the country move on to the continuity of what was happening the last 4 years in terms of economy, for sure, foreign affairs, the role of the country in the EU and in the West in general. And this is what the people appreciated, because just to follow up to what Carol said.
Just on the people, just because I'm curious to know exactly what the Greeks that went out to vote feel about the outcome of the election. I'd like to bring in some voices now from the grounds. Euronews' Faye Duclary was on the streets of Athens chatting to locals. Take a listen.
The result was expected. It is as it should be. And the future is ahead of us. I am satisfied because we had a positive outcome, but I am not satisfied because we will go to a second election. I'm very surprised by these results. The Greeks should not have gone to vote.
For the next 4 years, the country is going to be governed by a government that doesn't act in the people's interest.
The fact that New Democracy took 42% after making so many mistakes is unacceptable, and this is against the people. I don't know where to begin. The wildfires, the tragic railroad accident, the problems of the citizens.
Faye Duclary there reporting for us, showing us really the different perspectives there, how divided as well people are over in Greece. She mentioned, the lady there, those mistakes that New Democracy has made. What do you say to that?
Yeah. No, I mean, these are all, well-documented tragedies, situations that have occurred. I was just thinking when the other gentleman was saying that we shouldn't have gone to elections at all. I mean, systematically, all the polls have shown that New Democracy would have won this and that there wasn't a big difference. So from that point of view, I can see how there could be a thought that, the resources could be put somewhere else. But of course, constitutionally, this was the moment to go to elections. But there have been, of course, it's very well documented, and the Prime Minister himself, has been saying these tragedies need to be avoided. There needs to be more work on modernizing from train systems to etc. But Greece is also in the part of the Mediterranean which is heating in terms of climate change 20% more than any region in the world. So the wildfires will continue. That's something that needs to be dealt with, I think, much more strongly in the future as well. But, do happen regularly, and that has to be taken into account of where we go in the future.
Brief reaction to that clip there from yourself, Carol?
I think if you compare the tragedies which we've seen the past 4 years compared to the tragedies under Syriza, I think people have made their judgment. I mean, the tragedies under Syriza were much bigger, has affected many more people than these tragedies which we've seen in the news over the last months, like the trains or like the spying or like the what happened, the wildfires and so on last year. People have their judgment, and that's the nice thing about these elections, that you see that people manage to judge what is most important. And if you see the loss of wealth under Syriza, I mean, this is just a drama. This is what you see in economic policy. This is so important, I say, in world wealth overall. Let's say, if you make a bad choice, how you can affect all of us as well. If we make a bad choice in elections, you have a stupid government in place which basically destroys wealth, which you've seen, by the way, in Brexit, for example, as well. But this is, I mean, this is just unbelievable.
Hannes, on this spying allegations, I mean, this obviously has shown a bit of tension between Brussels and Athens, allegations that the incumbent Prime Minister and his government have been spying on journalists, spying on opposition leaders. Where are we now with that?
So this was one of the scandals, how is it called, like the Greek Watergate. The Prime Minister himself accepted that something like that, or admitted that something like that should have never happened. It was not correct to happen. He took immediately measures, as for all the disasters or all the problems that he had to face during this crisis, during his mandate. And it was not an easy mandate. He started with a hybrid attack in the Greek borders. He continued with COVID. Then you had for more than a year tensions with Turkey, a real standoff in East Mediterranean, and ended up with wildfires. Right now, about this spying case, the person who was responsible for that, he resigned. He was asked by the Prime Minister to resign. The Prime Minister said that this should have never happened. He apologized, and all the measures have started being taken with the justice.
Do you agree with that, just from your perspective?
I agree as the headlines of what has happened. That's absolutely factual. I do think that when this first came out, I expected it to be much quicker. Like, this is a fundamental right. That's unacceptable. But it took a few months. It took investigations. It took the European Parliament discussing. It took I wanted it to be like, that's an absolute fundamental right. Journalists should not be tapped. Opposition leaders should not be tapped.
One thing that's quite interesting about Greece, Ali, as well, and from your perspective, I'm sure you're well aware, is that press freedom in Greece is not good. If you take a look at the ranking by Reporters Without Borders, they're really far down on the list. They're 107. And EU member states like Ireland are number 2, Denmark number 3. I mean, is it dangerous today to be a reporter in Greece, Alia?
I would say yes. I would say media freedom needs to be more on top of the list of the priorities. I would say that democracy, which Greece is the birthplace of democracy. We discuss it, we talk about it, we see how it shaped and shifted in the thousands of years since first votes came in. But we need pluralism, we need independence, and pluralism is not there now. Business interests are much more prevalent than actual media freedom.
And your perspective on that?
No, you can control media very easily. Look what's happening in Hungary, but also in other states. How much of an envy control of media is for politicians, which we have seen in Greece. If you can kind of control public opinion in a way, but which we've seen in so many other countries, we were discussing this Fox News case, I mean, how crucial it is. And that's why we have to think, and I don't know whether it's probably, like you're saying, not sufficiently happening, about ways by which you can strengthen media freedom also in a kind of a capitalist system.
Is Greece just not used to critical media?
No, I wouldn't agree with
I wouldn't go that far.
Carol. I will just say that indeed there is this list which shows Greece performing very badly in freedom of press. But if you see the list, Greece is below other, let's say, African or Asian countries, which is, with all due respect, I mean, I don't think that Greece is like the hell place to be a journalist. It is, I think that freedom of press exists in Greece, but I believe it's a structural problem which you can see also in other countries. The interconnection between media and businessmen, which media itself, they are not profitable, they don't have the necessary resources, makes also their bosses, their leaders, their businessmen who have other interests to somehow interact with the governments. And the problem is there. But this is not only a Greek phenomenon. This is a phenomenon you can see in Italy, you can see in other European countries. So I wouldn't say that Greece is the paradigm of lack of freedom for the journalists or from whomever wants to express its voice.
Well, let's see how that index elaborates the next time we hear from Reporters Without Borders. But I'd also like to discuss the topic of migration. I would like to know, did it play a role in the elections? Because, of course, it's a massive issue for the European Union as a whole. And we saw this week the European Commission warning Greece that it could take formal steps over a migrant pushback claim that came out this week in the New York Times. I'm sure you've all seen the article. Images of around 12 people, including an infant taken out to sea and allegedly left there by Greek authorities. Now, we've seen the incumbent Greek Prime Minister, he's denied all and said that this is unacceptable, he said in an interview earlier this week. But let's just take a listen to the EU Commission spokesperson. She's Anita Hipper. She was quizzed about this topic earlier this week in Brussels.
The Commission has expressed its concern by the footage shown to us by the New York Times, and it is not possible for the Commission alone to verify these images. This is why the Commission has now inquired and is inquiring with the Greek authorities about this.
Anita Hipper there speaking a little bit earlier this week. Now, as I said, the Greek Prime Minister, Mitsotakis, he said that this is unacceptable and that he's not responsible. Is he telling the truth, Carol?
Of course, we don't know exactly. We'll never know exactly. I think there's certainly both sides to be blamed. But the problem is, let's say, with migration, as we see in Italy or in other countries as well, it's extremely difficult to play 100% according to the rules and to be 100% human with what's going on. Also, you're confronted on the other side with smugglers who are just basically earning money on thousands of euros on transferring people. So their interest as compared to the interest of the other side who want to act honestly are totally different.
Hannes?
Yeah, based on that video that New York Times showed, seeing it, I really feel sad. This should have never happened. And as you said, the Prime Minister said that if this is the case, we start an investigation. However, as Carol said, it's very difficult sometimes to control what is happening, especially in the sea. They might be pushed forward also from the other side. And what New Democracy government has promised since 2019 when it was elected, it was to secure the Greek borders and to secure the European borders consequently.
And also, Alia, to perhaps build fences. And these policies from Prime Minister Mitsotakis have also got the support of the Greek people.
According to the last vote we had, they have. It's not exactly the most humanitarian response one can imagine. It's not something which the Commission has said repeatedly they don't fund walls. So this is something that is a bit still, it's true if, I suppose, in theory we would go down that path, there would obviously be less people crossing if that were to be the case, but it goes into a different type of thinking of building around a problem instead of.
But this kind of thinking is not really a taboo. I mean, we've had this conversation a few times already on this show.
Don't forget that in 2015-16, when on the peak of the refugee crisis, Greece, like Italy, Greece mainly, was one of the frontline states. Mm-hmm. It had to receive a huge number of immigrants, refugees, that it was impossible to handle. And even with the EU-Turkey statement, we didn't see necessarily the situation improving better. So the Greek government had to take even tougher measures. And especially after what happened in 2020 in the Greek-Turkish borders with the hybrid attack, I think it was no other choice. The Greek government had to react, because there were also internal reactions. And we saw also that the European leadership supported this immediate reaction and the plans of the Greek government at that time. So I think that maybe immigration didn't play a huge role in these elections, but it didn't play a huge role in this election because the Greek government performed very well these 4 years in that field.
OK, and we will keep an eye, Panos, on those elections that could take place at the end of June. But for now, thank you so much. That is all the time I'm afraid we have on that topic. But don't go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be heading to the Flemish city of Antwerp, where 80% of the world's rough diamonds are traded on just one tiny street. Stay with us here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show about European affairs. I'm Maeve McMahon. Well, this week, EU foreign affairs ministers were here in town discussing their ongoing trade sanctions against Russia. But for now, there's still no ban on the imports of Russian diamonds. There's just too much at stake for the Belgian economy. But speaking last week at the G7 in India, the EU Council President, Charles Michel, was adamant that that was not the final decision.
We are now focused on shutting the door on loopholes and continuing to cut Russia off from critical supplies. We will restrict trade in Russian diamonds. Russian diamonds are not forever.
Charles Michel there, also a former Belgian Prime Minister, may I add, just in case our viewers didn't realise. So I'm sure that comment didn't go down too well here in Belgium. But Cara, let's start with you, because you're of course from Belgium, and tell us just how difficult this is really perhaps for Belgium to sign up to this deal, because of course the UK has already signed off on a ban.
Even as Belgians, we don't know too much about this. This is a business which is happening off-screen, below the radar screen. We know so little about this. And we've heard, as Belgians, we've read in the news that even the Belgian government apparently managed to get it off the sanctions list so far. So apparently it is a very powerful group. But also within Belgium, we don't know, let's say, who's in charge of this. Of course, there is something like a diamond bank in Antwerp, even this. But there are different groups involved. Of course, everybody knows there is a kind of this Jewish sect which is very strong in Antwerp. But it's not only them. It's also Indians, but it's also others which are active. And there are brokers which are active in diamond trade. But on top of that, so there is diamonds, there are the real diamonds, but also everybody knows there are synthetic diamonds. And you need to be an expert to know what is a real diamond. And I can carry with me more than 1 million of diamonds without you seeing it, let's say. So it's something which is open to fully illicit trades. So even if you were to have sanctions in place, could you ever control it? Because it concerns a thing which is extremely small. So you can sit in a plane full of diamonds and nobody will notice.
Okay, a little insight into the world of the diamond trade here in Belgium. Well, just to give some figures there to our viewers, according to the Antwerp World Diamond Centre, 84% of the rough diamonds go through Antwerp. The industry is worth €43 billion, and Russia is the top country in diamond production with around €3 billion in value. Alia, do you think this will ever get on the list?
I think it's possible. I think just to look at a bigger picture, if you see from when this aggression began from Russia to Ukraine and kind of a global trade scenario, there has been a lot of like recalculating, re-seeing what's worth more, what's not worth more, what can be sanctioned or can't be sanctioned. It kind of started with the banks. That was kind of an automatic, if I can say it that way, because that's a very general, but that went across many countries, and the EU was very quick to 11 sanctions here. There were quite a few tranches, I think. You said this is now the 6th or the 7th. The 11th, voila.
The focus this week was more on sanction circumvention.
Right.
Panos, what's your take? Would you agree with Karel says it wouldn't even matter anyway if there was a ban?
To be honest, I'm not an expert on the topic, but from what I understand, the West has taken a decision to support Ukraine, to help in any way, either with military hardware, with sanctions, with intelligence, Ukraine to win the war. So if we see the bigger picture, yes, we have to sanction Russia, to put sanctions on Russia on whatever we can, and we should not focus on the small national interest, because we can say about other countries, about agricultural products, that when Russia sanctioned in that field, they also felt the heat from that. So in my opinion, if we can sanction Russia on that, we should do it.
Okay, we should do it. Well, of course,
Sure.
Very briefly, Alia?
I was just going to say just what you said of that it's not important. I think that it's that big that it would make such a big difference. That's why it's taking so long to get there, because the diamond trade in the world is enormous, coming from, I'm Greek-Australian, so Australia also being a diamond stronghold. It's a massive.
Well, the sector, of course, is concerned the sector here in Belgium that sanctions could shift Russian exports elsewhere, leaving Antwerp and losing revenue. And we actually had a reporter there this week, Ida Sanchez. She took a visit to the Flemish city to hear some opinions. Take a listen.
If the European Union would decide to do it alone, that would be very dramatic, of course, for Antwerp, because it means that the rest of the world, who doesn't really care about sanctions, that's the reality of things, will keep trading Russian diamonds, so you will make no impact on the Russian economy. The only one who will be suffering will be the Antwerp industry.
I refuse to use Russian diamonds, but you have to know that Antwerp is one of the strictest and most regulated diamond hubs in the world. But the problem is that the banks won't take payments if you're wanting to buy Russian diamonds. So there's already like a ban.
Interesting take there, right, from Mrs. Brainwain, that there's already kind of a de facto ban. Carol?
Yeah, but if you look at this, I followed, let's say, specifically the financial sanctions, there are still many ways around. Meaning you can do a payment to, for example, India, to another country which does not follow the sanctions. The same like for the diamonds, if you don't follow the sanctions in another country. But also, we haven't sanctioned all banks. So if I remember correctly, Gazprom Bank, until today, because of the gas trade, is still not sanctioned. So I can pay my diamond from Russia through Gazprom Bank.
So you are calling for more sanctions, but our sanctions that we currently have on the table, are they just not working? They're not efficient.
But this is, I think, what Carl said. This is the key. The key is the unanimity. The unanimity in the EU and in NATO. You don't need to have Trojan horses from where Russia can somehow circumvent the sanctions. So I think that we, as Europeans, as Westerners, as Western world, we should be more strict with the countries that they are helping Russia to avoid sanctions. So maybe not. Maybe the sanctions are not to some extent as impactful as we were expected. But if we see some data in 2022, and I think in 2023 is expected to be more, the Russian economy, Russia's economy's growth is decreasing. I think it was around 2 point something this year. So yes, I think we should continue with sanctions, more targeted sanctions, and we should not just stick to small sectoral interests. We should see the bigger picture there.
And just briefly, Ali, is the support still out there among the European population, you think?
I think so. I think it's we have to do everything we can to fight this aggression and to stop the war eventually. So, yes, I think that people are supporting Ukraine, and these are means to do it.
We'll have to come back to that topic, actually, Alia, because interesting enough, a couple of weeks ago, I saw new data from the European University Institute over in Florence, and they were actually arguing that according to their research, public opinion across the European Union was dwindling. There was less and less support for the stance that the EU is taking regarding ending that war in Ukraine. But we'll come back to that another day, because I'm afraid that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for your insights, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show about the week that was. Well, one of the most talked about stories here in Brussels this week, apart from actually the EU's $14 billion tax fight against Apple in Luxembourg, was the European Data Protection Board fining Meta €1.2 billion plus in order to stop exporting EU user data to the US for processing. Did you all follow the story?
Slightly,
yeah. Tech expert.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think of this?
Yeah, it was, historic, as many papers have said. The first time it's been issued at that kind of an amount for this type of GDPR issue. It's super interesting. There are a lot of policy-related issues that are still not set on this. There was a safe harbor years ago, there was a privacy shield years ago. These have all, over time, been stopped or dissolved through legislation. And now there is a new agreement that would have a transatlantic agreement, but it's not fixed in stone, so it's hard to see how European data will be protected without such action. So
well, let's just bring in as well the reaction, of course, from Meta.
Yeah.
I can imagine they are not happy.
Sure.
They're furious.
Of course not.
They've called it a conflict of law between the US government's rules on access to data and the privacy rights of Europeans.
Yeah.
And they've said they're disappointed to have been singled out. Carol, have you followed the case? What's your take?
Yes, of course, I follow the case. I mean, you look at this, you look at all these cases which have affected big tech over the last year, certainly affecting Ireland, for example, your country. But that was mostly related to state aid issues. Now it's one of the first times that we have a big case involving respect of European data protection, basically European law relating to big tech. And that, of course, is remarkable. But also, we need to be aware as Europeans that we are more or less the only jurisdiction in the world to have such tight laws, not only now on data protection, but also law on the way they behave. I mean, the data, the markets in DMA and DSA, I mean, and these, for these entities like Meta, like Twitter, and so on. So it is extremely important that Europeans realize that we have entities which are now pursuing the protection of our data. And also there you see that European public opinion, I think over the last 5 years, has enormously changed, whereas 5 years ago they wouldn't be concerned. Now many Europeans are extremely concerned and see that our data by a lot of the big tech are used all the time. So I think Europeans overall will be in favor because most Europeans, I think, are upset by the way our data are used. So the EU is doing basically what citizens want, I think, and that's also towards European elections, something Europeans should be aware of.
Yeah.
Like what we've done now on AI. We will be the first jurisdiction in the world to have legislation on AI, whereas the rest of the world is concerned.
Point of view on this, and do you think Meta will cough up that money?
I will agree with Carol, basically. I mean, GDPR is there to protect Europe citizens' data. I mean, if this is their role, that's why they had the fine. If they breached it, they deserved it. So it's as simple as that. So, yeah.
And the other question, will they afford to pay the bill? I mean, they're
I'm
also
pretty sure they will.
They can afford it.
Was it 10,000 people go this year?
They will go and appeal like Apple has done, and they will, of course, there are thousands of lawyers working in the city, and they will certainly have an interest to and they will find a clause, let's say, where they haven't respected the procedure. That's always possible. But the most important thing is that they have done it. But also a very important thing is that we have authorities, not only at European level, also at national level, which are looking at the implementation of the laws. So we have European Data Protection Authority, but we have also national authorities, also as a result of the Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act. All member states have to put in place entities which look after this. So that's extremely important.
It's a matter of principle and credibility for the EU and its mechanisms at the end of the day.
Alia, final comment?
Facebook has been a digital tsunami, not only for journalism, but for tech and users in general. So this is just one other step in trying to find some kind of governance of the internet.
That is important indeed, the governance of digital, but also 1.2 billion. I mean, lawyers who will look at it will say, but how have you calculated this 1.2 billion? You have to document what is really the cost of infringing these rules. So this is not an easy thing to do. Huh?
I'm going to have to stop you there. That is, I'm afraid, all we have time for. But thank you so much to you all for coming and for all your insights. And thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to drop us a line, our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. And you can find us also on Instagram and Twitter. We'll see you soon here on Euronews.